then flick, you see, between that and that. And you do get this kind of discrepancy between the, you know, between the inks, because they never dry the same way. And this gives a kind of shimmering effect. Well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that gives the film vitality. That's called boiling in the trade, and it's fantastic.
Being bored, thought Rhubarb, one very grey day, is, I suppose, a bit like being fed up. Being fed up, agreed Rhubarb, as he sat looking at himself in the water bowl, is a bit like being bored. Ah, well, what's on in the garden? Hummed he, as he watched the silvery rain sliding down and the soggy birds blobbing about in the wet. Shudder, shudder! How glad I am to be in here being bored and not being wet. But on the other paw, what do bored beings do to get unbored? Rhubarb asked himself. What about staring at television for an hour or so? Well, let's see what's on. Oh, just as I thought. The dog with the bones. I wonder how she got that test card job. I'd have eaten the bones by now.
When I do a rhubarb drawing, I have to draw the background in for every exposure that I want to make, and that can be a lot of work. So what can I do? Well, I take this off the pegs, I take a more detailed background, I put it on the registration pegs, I keep it there, and I take a piece of clear cellulose acetate, known in the trade as cell, and I put this over the registration pegs like this, and there you see Bob Cratchit in the doorway with Tiny Tim. Dick?
Yeah. This is the artwork from a scene in our production of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. And Cratchit and Tiny Tim come home, and his family, 4 children and his wife, rush to greet him. Now, you take one thing at a time when you're animating. Everything would be tested separately. You do a series of drawings in pencil, just like Jonathan did. The little girl, she runs up and grabs her father's leg. Now, this is how we put it on cell. If you take a plain piece of cell, and they come always with a protective tissue on the back, which you should always keep with it, because the things get marked up, and you can see through it easily anyway, because it's like tracing paper. You then trace the drawing on celluloid, or cellulose, or whatever it is, cell. Really, you can use anything that will go on cell. You can use ink, colored inks, or repeatograph pens, anything that you can get to go on the cell, by all means put it on. Then, having done the tracing, which isn't terribly good, one turns the cell over and fills it in with color on the back. Now, yeah. Bob's using, what do you call it, emulsion paint. Not enamel paint, but any plastic-based paint. You can buy emulsion paint at the corner shop, and you can add designer's colors into it to get richer color, whatever you like.
I'm wearing a white glove because I don't want to scratch the cell. The scratches pick up quite a bit. You have to be very careful with these cells. They're full of electrostatic. Okay, there's the girl with her hair painted.
They also dry very quickly, but we won't wait for it to dry. Better if I take a finished, already dried cell of the girl. And this is it. You can see the drawing on the front of the cell, and then the emulsion paint painted on the back. And that's all there is to it. Now, there are 2 reasons for using this method. One is that you can obviously see the background through the celluloid, and the other is that you can work different parts at different speeds. This is one of the few scenes in the film where we used several layers. Cratchit's in the doorway, but first we had at the door the headless sister. Her head will be on another cell. This is the bottom layer of animation. This boy who isn't going to move at all. Then the next layer would be Cratchit, a series of cells with he and Tiny Tim moving on it. Then the head of the sister, who will be looking around as the others run up at a different speed, and this little boy running towards his dad, and the daughter rushing for the leg again, and the mother who will take a few paces forward and stop. So it's all interlocking. Now, one thing that happens, a disadvantage of these many layers, is that each layer has a natural coloration to it, and it gets kind of, the more you use, the thicker it gets. But the idea is to keep it simple. Do not use many levels if you can help it. But just to show it isn't a disastrous effect, this is the finished scene from the Christmas Carol.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day
Come on, Timmy.
who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Now, the whole thing about this method is to break things, take one thing at a time and break things into layers so they're all traveling at different speeds. And if we'll see a fantastic piece of Disney animation now which shows this marvelously. This is in Pinocchio, where they have the whale with a fire lit by Pinocchio inside him, and he's about to lose his temper and go mad. Now, the whale is a marvelous piece of animation which would have been animated very, very roughly on paper, and he is shunting like a 20,000-ton creature about to go mad, and the water is reacting at a different speed, on a different cell level. Seagulls are flapping around going mad on a different, traveling at a different speed on a different cell level. The steam is coming out of the spout of the whale in a different layer. There are about 4 layers at work. And this is terrific because it isn't just that complicated, but they've got the main power of the scene right, and then they add all the embellishments into it. One of the most fascinating things and most difficult things in animation is to do a good walk. And there's far more to it than just pumping one foot in front of the other. Personally, I used every kind of trick in the world to avoid doing walks for several years because they were so challenging. And then fairly recently we discovered the great secret of doing good walks, and I give it to you now. This is, if Bruce gets into, there are 2 drawings you do first. The first drawing, which is a contact position, or the contact position where the foot is down, hitting the ground. And then the end position, where it's going to, the next foot hitting down. Those are the 2 contact positions. Now, in the middle, if Bruce does it again, that we have what we call the crossover, or passing position. And if you get that right, the rest of you just fill in the drawings, the speed, whether you want a lot of drawings if he's walking slowly or a few drawings if he's walking quickly. That gives you your standard walk. So the whole thing will come out looking something like this.